The letter trembled in my hands, its crisp edges threatening to slice through my carefully constructed world. I read the words again, my heart pounding against my ribs like a caged bird. Dearest Paige, not all is as it seems in your perfect life. Beware the viper in your nest. No signature, no return address, just a cryptic warning that sent chills down my spine. Honey, what's that? Anthony's voice startled me, and I quickly folded the letter, shoving it into my pocket. Oh, nothing. Just some junk mail, I lied, forcing a smile. Ready for dinner? Anthony's warm brown eyes crinkled as he grinned. Always. But are you sure you're okay? You look a bit pale. I waved off his concern, determined not to let this mysterious message ruin our evening. I'm fine, really. Just hungry. Let's go. As we walked to our favorite Italian restaurant, my mind raced. Who could have sent that letter? And what did it mean? I'd worked hard to build my life with Anthony, a successful career, a loving marriage. Was someone trying to destroy that? The hostess greeted us with a bright smile. Mr. and Mrs. Hartley, your usual table is ready. We settled into our seats, and I tried to push the letter from my thoughts. Anthony reached across the table, taking my hand. So, how was your day, sweetheart? I hesitated, then decided to stick as close to the truth as possible. It was interesting. I got a strange piece of mail today. Anthony's eyebrows furrowed. Strange how? Before I could answer, our waiter appeared. Good evening, folks. Can I start you off with some drinks? We placed our orders, and I used the interruption to gather my thoughts. When the waiter left, Anthony leaned in, his voice low. Paige, what's going on? You're not yourself tonight. I sighed, reaching into my pocket. I received this today. I handed him the letter, watching his face as he read it. His eyes widened, then narrowed. What the hell? Who would send something like this? I don't know, I admitted, but it's got me rattled. Do you think? Could it be your mother? Anthony's jaw clenched. Violet? Why would you think that? I shrugged, feeling guilty for even suggesting it. She's never liked me, Anthony. You know that. He shook his head firmly. No, she wouldn't do something like this. It's probably just some sick joke. I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me. Our food arrived, and we ate in tense silence, the letter casting a shadow over our usual easy companionship. As we finished our meal, Anthony's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked up at me with an odd expression. It's my grandmother. She wants us to come for a family gathering next month. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Your grandmother? Gabrielle? He nodded. Yeah, she says it's been too long since we've all been together. What do you think? My mind raced. Gabrielle had always been kind to me, unlike Violet. But the thought of facing Anthony's entire family with this mysterious threat hanging over my head made my stomach churn. I don't know, Anthony, with work and everything. He reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Come on, Paige, it might be good for us. Get away from the city, clear our heads, and maybe we can figure out what's going on with this letter. I bit my lip, torn between my desire to avoid conflict and my need to uncover the truth. Finally, I nodded. Okay, let's do it. As we left the restaurant, my phone pinged with a new email. I opened it, then stopped dead in my tracks, my blood running cold. Anthony, I whispered, showing him the screen. Look. There, in stark black and white, was a photo of us at dinner taken just minutes ago. Below it, the same chilling message, beware the viper in your nest. Anthony's face paled. We need to call the police. I nodded, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. As we waited for the officers to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were about to change dramatically. The viper, whoever they were, was closer than we thought, and they were watching our every move. The police report sat on our coffee table, a stark reminder of the unsettling events from last week. I stared at it, my mind racing with unanswered questions. Who was watching us? And why? Anthony's voice broke through my thoughts. Paige, honey, did you hear me? I blinked, focusing on his concerned face. Sorry, what? He sighed, sitting next to me on the couch. I said, Grandma Gabrielle called again. She's really hoping we'll come to the family gathering next month. My stomach twisted. With everything that had happened, I'd almost forgotten about the invitation. I don't know, Anthony. Maybe we should stay home, figure out what's going on with these threats. He took my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. I understand you're scared, but maybe getting away is exactly what we need. The police said they'd keep investigating. And who knows, Being around family might help us feel safer. I snorted. Safer? With your mother there? Anthony's face fell, and I immediately regretted my words. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... No, you're right, he said quietly. Things have always been tense between you and Mom. But Paige, she's still family, and Grandma Gabrielle adores you. It might be good for all of us to spend some time together. I bit my lip, torn between my instinct to hide away and the nagging feeling that facing Anthony's family might lead to some answers. Okay, I said finally. Let's do it. Anthony's face lit up, and he pulled me into a tight hug. It'll be great, you'll see. As he went to call his grandmother, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and preparation. No more threatening messages arrived, but the memory of that photo kept me looking over my shoulder. Finally, the day of our departure arrived. As we loaded our bags into the car, I noticed a sleek black sedan parked across the street. My heart raced. Anthony? I whispered, nodding towards the car. He frowned. I've never seen that before. You think it's connected to the threats? Before I could answer, the car's engine roared to life and it sped away. We exchanged worried glances but said nothing as we got into our own vehicle. The drive to Anthony's family home was tense, filled with stilted conversation and long silences. As we pulled into the long, tree-lined driveway, I felt my anxiety spike. Gabrielle was waiting on the porch, her silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. She waved enthusiastically as we parked. My dears, you're here at last. Anthony helped me out of the car, squeezing my hand reassuringly. We walked up to greet Gabrielle, who enveloped us both in a warm hug. Oh, how I've missed you both, she said, her eyes twinkling. Come in. Everyone's so excited to see you. As we entered the house, I caught sight of Violet standing in the hallway. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her eyes cold as they swept over me. Anthony, she said warmly, embracing her son. Then, almost as an afterthought, she turned to me. Paige, how nice to see you. I forced a smile. Hello, Violet. Thank you for having us. An awkward silence fell, broken only when William, Anthony's father, appeared from the living room. There you are, he boomed, clapping Anthony on the back. Good to see you, son. And Paige, welcome back. As the family exchanged greetings, I noticed Violet's eyes narrow, her gaze fixed on something behind me. I turned to see what had caught her attention and froze. There, sitting on an antique side table, was a familiar-looking envelope. My heart pounded as I approached it, my hand shaking as I picked it up. What's that, dear? Gabrielle asked, her voice laced with curiosity. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers, already knowing what I would find inside. As I unfolded the paper, the now familiar words leapt out at me. Beware the viper in your nest. I looked up, meeting Violet's icy stare. In that moment, I knew with chilling certainty that our family gathering was about to become a battlefield, and I was woefully unprepared for the war ahead. The envelope crinkled in my grip as I stared at Violet, my heart pounding. Her icy gaze never wavered, and I felt a chill run down my spine. What's that, dear? Gabrielle's voice broke the tension. I quickly folded the note and shoved it into my pocket. Nothing important, I lied, forcing a smile. Just some old mail. Anthony's hand on my back steadied me. Let's get settled in, shall we? He suggested, sensing the unease in the air. As we carried our bags upstairs, I couldn't shake the feeling of Violet's eyes boring into my back. Once in our room, I turned to Anthony. Did you see that? The envelope? He nodded, his brow furrowed. I did. You don't think... I don't know what to think anymore, I admitted, but I'm sure it wasn't there when we arrived. A soft knock interrupted us. Gabrielle poked her head in, smiling warmly. Everything all right in here? I've made some lemonade if you'd like to join us on the porch. We followed her downstairs, the tension from earlier momentarily forgotten in the face of her kindness. As we stepped onto the porch, I noticed my favorite handbag was missing from where I'd left it. Has anyone seen my purse? I asked, trying to keep the panic from my voice. Violet looked up from her seat, her expression unreadable. Oh, I moved it inside. Wouldn't want anything to happen to it out here. I thanked her, but something in her tone made me uneasy. When I retrieved the bag, I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been rifled through. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself constantly on edge. Every time Violet entered a room, the air seemed to crackle with tension. Even William, usually so easygoing, seemed affected by the atmosphere. That evening, as we prepared for dinner, I noticed my toiletry bag had been moved. Items were out of place, and my favorite perfume was missing. "Anthony," I called, my voice shaking. "Something's not right here." He came to my side, his face etched with concern. "What is it?" I explained about the misplaced items, the missing perfume. His frown deepened. "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. Let's talk to Mom about it after dinner." But dinner was a tense affair. Violet dominated the conversation, regaling us with stories of Anthony's childhood, stories that pointedly excluded me. I pushed my food around my plate, appetite gone. "So, Paige," Violet said suddenly, her voice syrupy sweet. "How's that big project of yours going? The one that's keeping you so busy you can hardly visit family?" I felt my cheeks burn. It's going well, thank you." She hummed, taking a sip of wine. "I do hope it's worth all the sacrifices you're making. Family should always come first, don't you think?" Before I could respond, Gabrielle intervened. "Now, Violet, I'm sure Paige is doing her best to balance everything. It's not easy being a modern working woman." Violet's lips thinned, but she said nothing more. The rest of the meal passed in uncomfortable silence. Later that night, as Anthony and I prepared for bed, I couldn't shake my unease. "I think we should leave," I whispered. "Something's not right here." He sighed, pulling me close. "Let's give it one more day, okay? Maybe things will improve." I nodded reluctantly, but sleep eluded me. In the early hours of the morning, I crept downstairs for a glass of water. As I passed the study, I heard hushed voices. Curious, I inched closer to the door. "Can't keep this up, Violet," I heard Gabrielle say. "It's not right." "I'm doing what's best for this family," Violet hissed back. "That woman is poison. She'll destroy everything if we let her." My blood ran cold. I stumbled back, knocking over a vase. The crash echoed through the silent house. The study door flew open, and I found myself face to face with Violet and Gabrielle. Violet's eyes narrowed dangerously. Well, she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Eavesdropping, are we? I always knew you couldn't be trusted." As I stood there, frozen in shock, I realized that the viper in the nest was closer than I'd ever imagined, and she was poised to strike. My heart thundered in my chest as I faced Violet and Gabrielle. The shattered vase lay at my feet, a perfect metaphor for the fragile piece that had just been destroyed. I wasn't eavesdropping," I stammered, trying to regain my composure. "I just came down for some water." Violet's eyes narrowed. "Of course you did," she sneered. "Always the innocent one, aren't you, Paige?" Gabrielle placed a restraining hand on Violet's arm. "Now let's all calm down. It's late, and tempers are frayed. Why don't we discuss this in the morning?" Before anyone could respond, footsteps thundered down the stairs. Anthony appeared, his hair mussed from sleep. "What's going on?" I heard a crash. His eyes darted between me, his mother, and his grandmother, taking in the tension. "Paige? Mom? What happened?" I opened my mouth to explain, but Violet beat me to it. "Your wife was caught snooping, dear. It seems she can't help but stick her nose where it doesn't belong." Anthony's brow furrowed. "Paige, is that true?" I felt a surge of anger. "No, it's not. I came down for water and overheard them talking. Violet was saying I'm poison to this family." The silence that followed was deafening. Anthony looked stunned, his gaze shifting between his mother and me. Violet's face hardened. "You're twisting my words. I was merely expressing concern about how your career is affecting our family dynamics." "That's not what I heard," I retorted, my voice shaking. "You said I'd destroy everything if you let me." Anthony stepped between us, his face a mask of confusion and hurt. "Stop, both of you. This isn't helping anything." Gabrielle cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should all get some rest. We can discuss this calmly in the morning." As we trudged back upstairs, the tension was palpable. In our room, Anthony turned to me, his eyes searching my face. "Paige, what's really going on?" I sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. "I don't know, Anthony. Ever since we got here, strange things have been happening. My things have been moved, that threatening note appeared, and now this. I feel like I'm losing my mind." He sat beside me, taking my hand. "We'll figure this out, I promise. But you have to admit, sneaking around in the middle of the night doesn't look good." I pulled away, stung. "You don't believe me, do you? You think I'm making this up?" "No, that's not what I'm saying," he backpedaled. "I just think there might be a reasonable explanation for all of this." I stood up, pacing the room. "A reasonable explanation? Anthony, your mother hates me." She always has, and now she's trying to drive a wedge between us. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. Paige, please, she's my mother. I can't believe she'd do something like that. Then what am I supposed to think? I cried, tears threatening to spill. Am I imagining all of this? Anthony stood, reaching for me, but I stepped back. I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I need to leave. His face fell. Leave, Paige, no. We can work this out. I shook my head, grabbing my suitcase. I can't stay here, Anthony. Not when I feel like I'm going crazy. Not when you don't believe me. As I started throwing clothes into the bag, Anthony watched helplessly. Where will you go? He asked softly. I don't know, I admitted, but I need space to think, to figure out what's really going on here. Just then, a soft knock at the door interrupted us. Gabrielle's voice came through. Paige, Anthony, may I come in? There's something you both need to know. I exchanged a glance with Anthony, my hand frozen over my half-packed suitcase. Whatever Gabrielle had to say, I knew it would change everything. With a deep breath, I moved to open the door, bracing myself for what was to come. Gabrielle's revelation left Anthony and me reeling. She confessed to witnessing Violet's increasingly erratic behavior, including tampering with my belongings. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air as she left us to process the information. I can't believe this, Anthony muttered, pacing our room. My own mother. I sat on the bed, my half-packed suitcase forgotten. What are we going to do? Before Anthony could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling. It's work. I have to take this. As he stepped out to answer the call, I felt a sudden urge to confront Violet. With Anthony distracted, I slipped out of our room and made my way downstairs. The house was quiet, but a sliver of light under Violet's study door caught my attention. Taking a deep breath, I knocked. Come in, Violet's voice called out, sounding surprisingly calm. I entered, my heart pounding. Violet sat behind her desk, looking every bit the matriarch she aspired to be. Ah, Paige, I was wondering when you'd come to see me. Why are you doing this? I demanded, my voice shaking. Why do you hate me so much? Violet's eyes narrowed. Hate is such a strong word, dear. I'm merely protecting my family. By sabotaging my marriage, my career? She stood, circling the desk. You don't understand what it means to be part of this family. Your career, your ambitions, they're a distraction. Anthony needs a wife who will support him, not compete with him. I felt my anger rising. That's not your decision to make. Anthony loves me for who I am. Does he? Violet smirked. Then why hasn't he confronted me about my erratic behavior? Why is he always caught in the middle, unable to choose a side? Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Before I could respond, the study door burst open. Anthony stood there, his face ashen. Paige, he said, his voice hollow. We need to talk. Now. I followed him back to our room, dread building in my stomach. Once inside, he turned to me, his eyes filled with hurt and confusion. That was my boss, he said. Apparently someone sent him emails from my account, bad-mouthing clients and revealing confidential information. I've been suspended pending an investigation. I gasped. Anthony, you know I would never. The emails were sent from our home network, Paige. He cut me off. While I was at work. You're the only one who has access to my computer at home. The implications of his words hit me like a tidal wave. You think I did this? Anthony, no, it must have been your mother. She's trying to drive us apart. He shook his head, looking torn. I don't know what to think anymore. This is my career we're talking about. My entire future could be ruined. Tears stung my eyes. I swear to you, I had nothing to do with this. Please, you have to believe me. Anthony sank onto the bed, head in his hands. I want to, Paige. But the evidence? I just don't know. In that moment, I realized the true extent of Violet's manipulation. She hadn't just been trying to drive a wedge between us. She was systematically destroying everything I held dear. I can't stay here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Not when you don't trust me. Anthony looked up, his eyes pleading. Paige, wait, but I was already grabbing my suitcase. As I headed for the door, I turned back one last time. I love you, Anthony, but I won't let your mother destroy me. When you're ready to see the truth, you know where to find me. With those words, I walked out, leaving behind the man I loved and the family that had become a battlefield. As I drove away from the house, tears streaming down my face, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The viper had struck, and now it was up to me to find a way to neutralize its venom before it was too late. I stared at my phone, my hands shaking as I read the email from my boss. Paige, we need to talk. Urgent matter concerning your position. Come to the office immediately. My heart raced as I drove to work, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. What could be so urgent? As I walked into the office, the tension was palpable. Colleagues averted their eyes, whispers following me down the hallway. My boss, Sarah, greeted me with a grim expression. Paige, please sit down. I sank into the chair, bracing myself. What's going on, Sarah? She sighed heavily. There's no easy way to say this. We've received multiple reports about your mother's criminal history, embezzlement, fraud. It's all over the office gossip mill. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? That's impossible. My mother's never been involved in anything illegal. Sarah slid a folder across the desk. Inside were newspaper clippings, court documents, all fabricated, all painting my mother as a career criminal. This has to be a mistake, I stammered. Someone set this up. Paige, I want to believe you, Sarah said, her voice softening. But these documents look legitimate, and given your access to sensitive financial information. The implication hit me like a ton of bricks. You think I'm involved? Sarah, I swear, none of this is true. She held up a hand. We have to investigate. In the meantime, I'm afraid we'll have to suspend you. I left the office in a daze, my career hanging by a thread. As I sat in my car, trying to process what had just happened, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. How does it feel to lose everything? Violet. It had to be her. Rage boiled inside me as I realized the extent of her machinations. She hadn't just targeted my marriage, she was systematically destroying every aspect of my life. Desperate for allies, I called the one person I hoped I could still trust. Gabrielle? It's Paige. I need your help. An hour later, I sat in Gabrielle's cozy living room, pouring out the whole sordid tale. She listened intently, her face growing more troubled with each revelation. Oh, my dear, she said when I finished. I had no idea Violet had gone to such lengths. This ends now. She stood, a fire in her eyes I'd never seen before. It's time I told you the whole truth about Violet. What Gabrielle revealed next shook me to my core. Violet's jealousy and manipulation hadn't started with me. It was a pattern that stretched back decades, affecting every relationship in the family. She nearly destroyed William and me when we first married, Gabrielle confessed. I've tried to protect her, to help her change, but this has gone too far. As we talked, piecing together Violet's web of lies, my phone rang. It was Anthony. Paige, his voice was urgent. Where are you? You need to come home right away. Mom's gone too far this time. I exchanged a glance with Gabrielle. What happened? She tried to access your work accounts. Dad caught her. It's a mess, Paige. Please come back. I'm so sorry I ever doubted you. Relief flooded through me at his words, quickly followed by determination. I'm on my way. And Anthony? I'm bringing reinforcements. As Gabrielle and I drove back to the family home, I felt a mix of dread and resolve. This was it, the final confrontation. Everything I had worked for, everything I loved, hung in the balance. Pulling up to the house, I saw Anthony waiting on the porch, his face etched with worry and regret. Behind him, I could hear Violet's voice, shrill and defensive. Gabrielle squeezed my hand. Are you ready, dear? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. As ready as I'll ever be. Together, we walked towards the house, towards the woman who had nearly destroyed everything I held dear. It was time to face the viper in her nest, once and for all. As Gabrielle and I entered the house, the tension was palpable. Anthony rushed to my side, his eyes filled with remorse. Paige, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you from the start. I squeezed his hand, grateful for his support, but focused on the task at hand. In the living room, Violet stood defiantly, her face flushed with anger. William sat quietly in the corner, looking defeated. Well, well, Violet sneered. The prodigal daughter-in-law returns. Come to cause more trouble? Gabrielle stepped forward, her voice steady. That's enough, Violet. It's time we all had a talk. For the next hour, the truth came pouring out. Gabrielle revealed Violet's history of manipulation, from her attempts to sabotage Gabrielle's marriage to William, to her constant interference in Anthony's life. With each revelation, Violet's facade cracked a little more. You don't understand, Violet cried, her voice shrill. I was protecting this family. Paige is tearing us apart with her career and her modern ideas. I couldn't stay silent any longer. No, Violet, you're the one tearing this family apart. You've lied, manipulated, and nearly destroyed my career and my marriage. Why? Because you can't stand the idea of your son being happy with someone you can't control? Violet's eyes flashed dangerously. You ungrateful little... She lunged forward, but Anthony intercepted her. Mom, stop, he shouted, holding her back. This has to end. Now. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. William answered it, returning with a grim-faced police officer. Mrs. Violet Hartley? The officer asked. We have some questions about recent unauthorized access to corporate accounts and spreading of false information. Violet's face drained of color. She turned to William, her voice suddenly small. You called the police on me? William stood tall for the first time since we'd arrived. It was the right thing to do, V. This has gone too far. As the officer began reading Violet her rights, she broke down completely. I did it all for you, she wailed, looking at Anthony. Can't you see? She'll never love you like I do. Anthony's face was a mask of pain and resolve. No, Mom. This isn't love. It's control. And it stops now. As Violet was led away, still shouting and crying, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The threat was over, but at what cost? Gabrielle gathered us all in the living room, her voice gentle but firm. We have a lot of healing to do as a family, but first, we need to make things right. Over the next few hours, we made calls, to my workplace, to Anthony's boss, to friends and family who had been affected by Violet's lies. It was exhausting, but with each call, I felt a little of the weight lift from my shoulders. As night fell, Anthony and I found ourselves alone on the porch swing. He took my hand, his voice thick with emotion. Paige, I don't know if I can ever make up for doubting you, but I promise, from this moment on you have my complete trust and support, always. I leaned into him, tears stinging my eyes. We both made mistakes, Anthony, but we're stronger for having gone through this. Together. As we sat there, watching the stars come out, I realized that this wasn't just an end to Violet's machinations. It was a new beginning for all of us. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There was still so much to repair, so many wounds to heal. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I had hope. The viper had been exposed, her venom neutralized. Now it was time to rebuild the nest, stronger, more resilient, and filled with the love and trust that Violet had tried so hard to destroy. 6 months after the confrontation, I stood nervously in front of the mirror, smoothing down my dress. Today was the day Violet would be released from her court-mandated therapy program, and we were all gathering at Gabrielle's house for a family dinner. Anthony appeared behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. You ready for this? I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. The drive to Gabrielle's was quiet, both of us lost in thought. As we pulled up, I saw William helping Violet out of their car. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile. Gabrielle greeted us at the door with warm hugs. Come in, dears. Everyone's here. The atmosphere in the living room was tense but not hostile. Violet sat in an armchair, her eyes downcast. When she looked up and saw me, I braced myself for the usual coldness. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes, remorse. Paige, she said softly, I owe you an apology. To all of you, she added, looking around the room. For the next hour, Violet spoke openly about her actions, her fears, and what she'd learned in therapy. She talked about her own difficult relationship with her mother, her fear of losing Anthony, and how she'd let those fears twist into something toxic. I know I can never fully make up for what I've done, she said, her voice breaking, but I hope in time you can all forgive me. The room was silent for a moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, William stood up and went to his wife's side. We've all made mistakes, Vi, but we're family. We'll get through this together. Anthony squeezed my hand, silently asking for my opinion. I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Mom, Anthony said, what you did was wrong. It hurt us all deeply, but we're willing to try if you are. It won't be easy, but we want to move forward as a family. Violet's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. I promise, I'll do better. As the evening progressed, I felt the tension in the room slowly dissipate. We shared a meal, talked about neutral topics, and even managed a few laughs. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. After dessert, Anthony and I exchanged a glance. It was time. Everyone, I said, standing up. Anthony and I have an announcement to make. All eyes turned to us, half curious. Anthony stood beside me, his arm around my waist. We're pregnant, he said, his voice filled with joy. You're all going to be grandparents and great-grandparents. The room erupted in cheers and congratulations. Gabrielle rushed to hug us, tears in her eyes. William beamed with pride. And Violet sat frozen, her face unreadable. For a moment, I feared we'd made a mistake in sharing our news. Then, slowly, Violet stood and approached us. She looked at me, then at Anthony, then back to me. A baby, she said softly. Then, to my utter amazement, she smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. Oh, my dears, what wonderful news. She hesitated, then opened her arms. May I? I nodded, and she enveloped me in a gentle hug. As she pulled away, she whispered, Thank you for giving our family a second chance. I promise to be the grandmother this child deserves. As we all gathered around, talking excitedly about the future, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past few months had been the hardest of my life, but they'd also taught me the true meaning of family, forgiveness, and resilience. Looking around at the smiling faces, Anthony's love, Gabrielle's wisdom, William's quiet strength, and even Violet's newfound warmth, I realized that we had all emerged stronger from this ordeal. The viper's venom had been painful, but it hadn't destroyed us. Instead, it had forged us into something unbreakable. As I placed a hand on my stomach, feeling the first flutter of new life, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a family.